Hello, friends. Welcome back to the table. I'm Trevor Allen, and for the last 23 years, I've been quietly reading and rereading Neville Goddard, looking for the moments in his books that finally make sense after you have lived with them long enough. At 61, I can tell you that the lines I am about to share with you today are not the ones I understood when I first opened these pages. They are the ones that revealed themselves slowly, patiently, after life had made me ready for them. So pour yourself something warm, sit with me, and let's read this passage on assumptions and facts together. The chapter we are sitting with today, friends, is called Assumptions Become Facts, from Neville Goddard's slim and powerful book Out of This World. 2 pages, 162 and 163, and I want to start by telling you very honestly that this is one of those chapters I had to read for many years before I understood why it disturbed me. When I first read it, somewhere in my late 30s, I thought it was a teaching about discipline, about controlling thoughts. Now at 61, I read it as a teaching about something far more humbling. It is about the quiet inner positions we carry without ever having put them into words, and how those positions are slowly, patiently becoming our outer life. Have you ever noticed, friends, how certain patterns in a life repeat themselves with an almost unsettling precision? You promise yourself this year will be different. You promise yourself this relationship will not end like the last one. You promise yourself this season your finances will finally stabilize. And then slowly, almost as if guided by an unseen hand, life arranges itself once again into the same shape, the same disappointment, the same kind of person, the same financial squeeze in the same month, the same version of yourself, looking at the same kind of situation through the same tired window. And the question that rises out of that pattern is the question this entire chapter quietly answers. What if your life is not confirming what you say you want, but what you have inwardly continued to assume? That is what Neville points at on these 2 pages. He is not talking about your surface thoughts. He is not talking about the noise that passes through your mind on any given afternoon. He is talking about the deeper inner positions you have quietly accepted as true. Things like, nothing ever really works for me. Money always leaves quickly. People eventually lose interest. I never get chosen. My situation is too fixed to change. These are not opinions, friends. According to Neville, these are the seeds out of which your facts grow. Right here at the top of the left page, Neville opens with a sentence that should make us pause. He writes, "Men believe in the reality of the external world because they do not know how to focus and condense their powers to penetrate its thin crust." Read that line with me again, slowly. The thin crust. Neville is calling the outer world thin. That is a very specific choice of word. Most of us treat the visible world as if it were the thickest, most authoritative thing in existence. We trust what we see, what we hear, what the bank tells us in the morning, what the silence of the phone confirms at night. But Neville is gently telling us that this whole crust is much thinner than we think. It is not the source, it is the result. The source is the inner assumption we have stopped questioning. Notice what Neville says next. He writes, "This book has only one purpose, the removing of the veil of the senses." That is the whole purpose of the chapter, friends. Not to motivate you, not to entertain you, to pull aside quietly the curtain of the senses, so that you stop confusing the visible report with the actual source. And then he tells us something I want you to truly hear, because it has shaped my own quiet mornings for many years. He writes that to remove the veil of the senses, we do not employ great effort. The shift is not about strain. It is not about pushing harder. It is not about wrestling with your own mind like an opponent. As he says here, the objective world vanishes by turning our attention away from it. That phrase, turning our attention away from it, does not mean denying that bills exist, or pretending hard situations are not real. It means refusing to use the present appearance as the final authority over what is possible for you. There is a difference, friends, between observing a condition and worshiping it. A person can see a temporary fact without letting that fact become an inner identity. A person can acknowledge a difficult moment without bowing to it as the verdict on their whole life. It took me years to learn that distinction. When I was younger, every difficulty felt like an announcement of who I was. Now at 61, I have come to see that a circumstance is simply a circumstance, and the inner stance I hold toward it is the much more powerful thing. Now this is the important part, because once attention is no longer captured by the appearance, it becomes free to do the one thing Neville actually wants you to do with it, to concentrate on the state desired. As he writes here, we have only to concentrate on the state desired in order to mentally see it, but to give it reality so that it will become an objective fact. Look carefully at that line. He does not say to picture the state, he says to give it reality, to mentally see it, and then to grant it the inner weight of something already true. The word reality is the key here, and this is where most people misunderstand Neville. They treat their desire like a wish. Wishing says, I hope this happens to me one day. Assumption says, this is already true of me. Wishing keeps the desire outside of you, somewhere ahead, somewhere you have not yet reached. Assumption moves you inside the desire, so that you are no longer the one waiting for it, but the one who has already become it. That is the entire difference, friends, between a life that keeps repeating itself and a life that finally turns a corner. Take money for a moment. Someone may consciously say, I want financial relief, but underneath, the silent assumption is something like, money always leaves before I can breathe. Every opportunity is uncertain. I will always be a little behind. So even when good news arrives, the inner assumption interprets it through the old lens. The relief is short. The fear returns quickly. The pattern repeats. Now imagine quietly replacing that assumption with another. Not as a slogan, not as a sentence shouted at the ceiling, but as a settled inner stance. I am supported. I am capable of holding what comes to me. From that inner stance, decisions change, tone changes, posture changes, and gradually the outer world begins to arrange itself around the new assumption, because the new assumption is now the source. The same is true of love. Someone may consciously want a steady, warm relationship, but underneath, the silent assumption is, I will eventually be forgotten. I will be replaced. I am not the one who is chosen. With that assumption alive in them, every silence becomes evidence. Every delay becomes confirmation. The person interprets neutral events through the lens of being unwanted, and life, faithful as ever, keeps producing experiences that fit that interpretation. Now imagine that inner assumption shifting to, I am loved, I am seen, I am chosen, not as a sentence forced over reality, but as an inner identity. The emotional reality changes first, and the outer world begins, slowly, to follow. And the same is true for the way you see yourself. A person may sincerely want to become more confident, healthier, freer from a heavy past. But if the deepest assumption is, I am still the person I have always been, the past keeps lending its weight to the present. The new desire is real, but the old assumption is realer to them. And in consciousness, friends, the realer one always wins. Neville knows this work is not easy, and he gives us a very gentle, practical suggestion right on the page. He writes that if it is difficult to control the direction of your attention while in a state akin to sleep, you may find gazing fixedly into an object very helpful. He is offering us a small tool. When the awake mind is too noisy, when the chatter will not quiet, slip into a softer, more dreamlike state, maybe in the late afternoon by a window, maybe just before sleep, and from there, calmly, almost lazily, occupy the state you wish to live from, not as a fantasy, as an inner fact. And he tells us, on this same page, exactly what to do in that softer state. He writes, imagine then that in this depth you are seeing and hearing what you want to see and hear, until your attention is exclusively occupied by the imagined state. Notice how precise that is, exclusively occupied, not 50%, not as a side activity. The inner state must become the main occupant of your awareness, even if only for a few quiet moments. That is what gives it the right to harden into fact. Now, on the right page, Neville gives us the line that after 23 years with these pages, I would tell you is the heart of the whole chapter. He writes, your assumption, though denied by the senses, if persisted in, will become fact. Read that slowly with me. Your assumption, though denied by the senses, if persisted in, will become fact. There is so much hidden in that one sentence, friends. He acknowledges, with full honesty, that the senses will deny your new assumption. They will tell you nothing has changed. They will show you the same room, the same number on the screen, the same silence, the same circumstances. But he says this denial is not the final word. If you persist inwardly, if you do not keep abandoning the new assumption, every time the senses disagree, the assumption will, in time, become fact. But here is what Neville is really saying. Persistence is not strain. It is not gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to feel something. He writes here that you know that consciousness is the one and only reality, and by this sustained mental attitude you give your gift of reality, and prove that you have the power to give reality to your desires, that they may become objective facts. Sustained mental attitude, that is the phrase. Quiet, steady, faithful. Not a one-day mood, not a high motivational moment that fades by the afternoon, a sustained inner climate, the kind of inner posture you carry through ordinary days, through quiet mornings and long walks, through the small unremarkable hours when no one is watching. And the moment a person enters that climate, Neville says, something quietly changes. He writes on this same page that your desire is not something you labor to fulfill, it is recognizing something you already possess. Read that line again with me. Not something you labor to fulfill, something you already possess. That single line dissolves the exhausting model most of us have been operating from. Most of us are chasing our desires as if they were prizes somewhere ahead in the distance. Neville is saying quietly that the moment the desire is inwardly assumed as already possessed, the chase ends, and the becoming begins. And he goes one step further, friends. He gives us the line that for me summarizes everything in this teaching. He writes, "Believing and being are one. Let that land. Believing is being." The inner conviction of what you are is not separate from what you are. They are the same thing seen from two sides, which means your assumption is not just shaping a future. In a real sense, it is already the inner version of you that the outer world is preparing to mirror. And the deeper point is this: facts are not random events that fall on you. Facts are the slow ripening of inner assumptions you have sustained, often without realizing you were sustaining them. Today's outer life is the matured fruit of yesterday's inner stance. And the inner stance you are quietly holding right now, the one you may not have even named yet, is already preparing tomorrow's facts. That is uncomfortable to read. But it is also, in my view, the most liberating sentence Neville ever offered us. Because if the inner assumption is the source, then the source is something you can change. Not by force, not by spectacle, quietly, patiently, from within. So today, friends, I want to invite you to sit with something simple. Pick one assumption you have been carrying for years. Just one. The kind that lives so deep you have stopped noticing it. Like an old piece of furniture you walk past every day without seeing. Bring it gently into the light. Look at it. Say it out loud even if you can. And then ask yourself with no rush if you are willing to set it down and live, even for an afternoon, from a different inner stance. Not as a wish, as a quiet inward fact. Friends, that's where we'll close the book for today. After 23 years with Neville, I can tell you that the lines we just read are not lines you understand by reading them once. They are lines you understand by living near them for a while, by letting them sit beside you on the table for a few weeks, until something inside you finally agrees with them. So if anything in this chapter on assumptions spoke to you, write to me in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd like to know which sentence stayed with you the longest. And if you want to keep sitting at this table with me, page by page, go ahead and subscribe so the next reading finds you. Until then, be gentle with yourself. I'll see you in the next one.